I would like to now invite Michael Retzel to come forward and lead us in our affirmation of covenant and light the chalice for us.
I light the chalice with these words. Open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Open our minds to learn what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant, which you will find printed in your order of service, saying, Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
In the summer of 2013, when I arrived in New Orleans to serve half-time as First Unitarian Universalist Church's developmental minister, their building, which after the storm and federal flood of 2005 had sat for weeks in about 5 feet of water, still bore marks of trauma, as did the whole city. 8 years after the storm, everyday conversations, even between strangers, would pause on August 29th, as with deep and genuine neighborly care, the ritual questions were asked and answered. Where were you? Where did you go? Who did you lose? Midway through that first year, the last repairs to the building were made. Floor tiles for hallways, a drop ceiling for the library, power restored to the chandeliers in the sanctuary lately brought out of storage and rehung. The temporary wall sconces previously connected by orange extension cords to outlets in the foyer, now replaced by wall-mounted oscillating fans. As these tasks were completed, I felt the congregation's energy shift. They were liberated from their post-storm mantra, recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. The work of repairing the storm damage was finished at long last. Now they could turn to more normal tasks of maintenance and upgrades for a more hopeful future. Soon, to make ourselves and our visitors more comfortable, we were ordering new chairs for the sanctuary and redistributing our 100 folding chairs to other spaces. Before the storm, there had been pews. To look more attractive to visitors, we repaired mortar and had the building exterior power washed. Later on, we even found a way to get that non-working bathroom off the foyer, used for a storage closet for years, back in service. Similarly, new attention and energy flowed to the church's ministries, greatly expanded during the city's period of rebuilding and recovery. First Church had housed volunteers during the city's years of recovery, converting second-floor classrooms into dormitories and constructing temporary showers in the enclosed courtyard. During those years, what had started simply as hospitality evolved into a service learning center with an anti-oppression curriculum where groups from congregations and colleges came typically for a week to help repair homes and neighborhoods and to learn about social systems and organizing. Organized as a separate nonprofit organization with a paid staff, its board composed of members of the 3 New Orleans UU churches and leaders from the wider community as well. with all three churches' ministers serving ex officio. The Center for Ethical Living and Social Justice Renewal developed relationships with more than 30 partner organizations in the city. Beyond our service learning ministry, we showed up for those partners to support their work and to provide opportunities for networking and community building among them. Through that extraordinary circumstance, as the new minister in town, I was handed introductions and access to the city's activists, organizers, and culture bearers on a plate. I was well positioned to learn a lot about the city, its people, and cultures, and quickly made acquaintances and developed friendships among a diverse range of neighbors. That experience showed me how much more possible it is for a church to have a strong community presence, strong and enduring connections with neighbors, strong and effective partnerships for social justice and change, just by committing to do simple things consistently, like meet and get to know our neighbors who are organizers and culture bearers, show up and support their work, and commit to keep learning and helping and deepening those relationships. A couple of weeks ago, I went through my calendar and notebooks and the business cards I've collected here in Little Rock and made a list of folks and organizations I've made some sort of contact with over the past year or so. Two things stood out for me. One was I've met more folks and been to more events than it feels like I have. The other was, though I've had conversations about them, I haven't shown up yet for as many of our church's ongoing service and social justice activities as I thought I had. I think that reflects the importance of relationships in service and justice activities. Because I'm connected with y'all, I feel more connected to the church's social ministries and partnerships than I actually am. And because of most of my community contacts beyond that have been with people I've met once or only a few times briefly, mostly at other organizations' events that I've attended, I didn't realize how many contacts I had made. And I think that's pretty typical. Most of us probably have met more folks than we think we have, and are apt to lose track of our opportunities to get to know a little better those we'd like to. And most of us get running on the same tracks all the time, which means we don't expand our circles regularly. I've found that's one of the benefits of getting to know organizers. They promote their activities and keep refreshing your menu of options. Organizing is one of the 5 elements of an effective church social justice ministry, according to the UUA's Social Justice Empowerment Program Handbook, available free online at uua.org. The other elements are direct service, like we do at Our House Shelter, for example, public education, advocacy, and public witness. One could add to that list financial support, as we will do a little later this morning through our Share the Plate program. And what these 5 or 6 elements of effective social ministry boil down to is our capacity to help. When we make a practice of generosity with our financial resources, as we do through Share the Plate, we carve out some capacity to offer financial support to organizations doing good work in our community. When we make a practice of generosity with our time and talents through volunteering, we carve out some capacity to help our neighbors through volunteer direct service. When we educate ourselves about social issues, needs, inequities, and injustices, we gain some capacity to help others learn about them too. When we are well acquainted with resources and decision makers in our area, we gain some capacity to call their attention to community needs through advocacy. When we are well connected with a diverse range of our neighbors, we gain some capacity to make public witness for our values at events like the annual Peace Pilgrimage, or a rally at the Capitol, or a public court proceeding, because we'll be more likely to hear about those things. What ties all these elements together is organizing. Organizing is creating the relationships and skills and structures that make those other 4 or 5 elements of effective social ministry happen, flow in productive directions, and respond to changing circumstances. This spring, I attended 2 big events put together by good organizers. One was an educational event hosted by Philander Smith University, a 70th anniversary commemoration of the Brown decision. 8 presenters, including our own Sherman James, considered its impacts and legacy from different angles, with the effect of putting organizing into a useful historical perspective. Several themes emerged. One is that organizing is for the long term. The strategy of challenging segregation through legal action against institutions of higher education was conceived and developed starting about 1939. The idea was to force the courts to try to do the impossible, enforce the doctrine of separate but equal. The NAACP lawyers who guided the strategy, Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall, knew that the harder the court tried to do that, the more complicated and unworkable the problem would become. 15 years of their strategic lawsuits culminated in Brown. But then came the complex task of implementing desegregation that Brown called for. For a decade after Brown, of Arkansas's 423 school districts, only 13 moved toward desegregation. Not accomplished, just moved toward. The 1964 Civil Rights Act accelerated the progress greatly. Between 1964 and 1966, 2 years, Arkansas went from 13 to 387 school districts working on desegregation. That's from 3% to over 90%. It still took many more years to achieve meaningful change, and there has been and continues to be resistance to it. The LEARNS Act provision that forbids discussion of white privilege, Section 16, is an example of that. To stop telling the true story of systemic oppressions in American history and who benefited from it is a step towards rolling back progress. One speaker presented a timeline that suggested that after about 35 years of gradual progress toward equal education and another 35 of efforts to turn it back, we are perhaps now at another turning point toward new progress. I'd like to believe that. I certainly hope for it. A related theme was the health impacts of both racism and justice work. The constant stress of having to cope every day with systemic oppression affects both mental and physical health and well-being. The risks one takes to confront and change those conditions can also be stressful and have harmful effects. For both, there are things one can do to reduce those impacts. Belonging to a community that provides collective mutual support, protective institutions, and sources of love and solace and encouragement, that stops to sing together, to lift spirits and keep up the faith. We are the children of the ones who persevered. That's one of the most important things to do, to lessen those impacts of stress. Another theme was that education was part of the civil rights movement itself. The literacy and citizenship education programs developed by Septima Clark and carried out by Dorothy Cotton empowered a great many civil rights leaders. Parents taught their children how to behave safely under segregation, but also to know that desegregation was possible and they might be the first generation to see it happen. History that was left out of school textbooks was taught at home, especially by those trained in citizenship education programs. All of that was strategic. The LEARNS Act represents continuing resistance to giving all our children a true account of our local and national history. History, health, and education were also themes at the second event I attended, the first ever statewide Arkansas Pride Summit. Leaders of pride organizations from around the state and some from neighboring states met at Hendrix College for a full day of workshops and conversations. Leaders of community, religious, and advocacy organizations were also there. We heard from representatives of the Arkansas chapters of the Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU, and local healthcare providers, including our own Gwen Herzig. Because this was the first statewide conference of pride organizations, there was a lot more hopeful conversation around resource sharing, collaboration, and other practical aspects of organizing. But also, we talked about organizing risks and how to stay safe. Our ACLU speaker highlighted police accountability. Providing your event security information to the police often means also giving it to the Proud Boys. We talked about the intersection of the suite of oppressive systems that privilege white, straight, cis men the most. And we noticed that attendance at this first statewide conference was overwhelmingly white. I came away wondering if, since organizers in the queer community here are overwhelmingly white, we might be prone to have a blind spot around how to organize safely. We talked about it, but are we really living it? I can say I feel safer surrounded by organizers in the Black community than I do among pride organizers. And it's not that I know one group better than the other. There's a cultural thing happening in that feeling. I'm getting signals, something in the quality of interpersonal interactions that produce that feeling in me. I'm not sure how much I'm contributing to that feeling, sub or unconsciously. But Eric Reese of the Human Rights Campaign, who is Black, began his presentation by asking us all to put down our pens and notebook and coffee and participate in a sort of meditative exercise that invited us to be in our feelings. He did that as a spontaneous response to reading the room when he got up to speak. He was the first one, first major speaker. He needed us to shift out of our everyday white rhythms. That's what I saw in it. And I don't think I put that on him. I think I read him accurately. Because in that moment, I didn't want to put down my pen and coffee. But I think he rightly judged that I needed to, that we all in that room needed to. I think he brought something to us, some wisdom from Black organizing culture that we didn't see we needed. Maybe we all need to be grounded that way more than we think we do. We all have defenses we prefer to keep up that interfere with deep connection, building relationships, and creating beloved community. And maybe that need has just been clearer to Black organizers. I have noticed greater awareness of it among them. That wasn't the first time a Black organizer told me to put down my pen. So I came away wondering how it would have gone if he had not been the first major presenter and didn't start us off that way. And reflecting on these experiences, I came around again to a deep feeling I have that I think is also a deep truth. Creating justice is inseparable from creating a beloved community. Listening for justice, then, is listening for evidence of a beloved community, a spirit of mutual love moving among us. And I thought again of that iconic moment in the 2016 presidential campaign when Black Lives Matter demonstrators interrupted one of Hillary Clinton's events. Clinton engaged them in conversation. Caught on both camera and microphone was an exchange between her and one of the demonstrators who argued with anguished passion for the need to change hearts to end racism. Clinton replied, "I don't believe you change hearts, I believe you change laws." They were both right. In a free and democratic society, everything depends upon how we choose to regard and treat each other. Hearts must conform to the values of beloved community, and laws need to reflect those values. Justice depends upon them. The disagreements and conflicts we will always have in a free and democratic society are opportunities to reground ourselves and listen for the spirit of mutual love and the shared values that can guide us toward justice. Working for justice is sometimes a maintenance task, sometimes a recovery operation, and in the best of times, an opportunity for upgrades. We have had and will have again struggles and hard experiences. We will have our times of asking with deep care, where were you? Where did you go? Who did you lose? And we will have our times of liberation and celebration. But the work will never be finished. Collectively, we continue to learn, to see more clearly, to ground ourselves more firmly in the values of love and justice, and as we do, the work will go on. How we organize holds the work together of service and learning, advocacy and public witness, support and connection. How we relate to each other creates the conditions of hell or heaven here on earth. May we reach out and participate in the spirit of mutual love. Amen.
And now I invite Michael to come back up to extinguish our chalice. And please join me in saying our closing words, which are in your order of service. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings.
and may you go forth with the courage of love.